backfired spectacularly as demand for the book skyrocketed on Friday. Now, over the next hour, I'm joined by the author himself. We'll also hear from a former SARS spokesperson turned whistleblower. We'll take you live to Moscow to explore the Russian connection in the book, and we'll unpack the backlash against the book and the unprecedented public interest. Now, it's important to note we did reach out to the NPA, the presidency, the State Security Minister, SARS and the ANC to join us on this program. They either declined, were unavailable or didn't respond to our requests. So let's kick off with the program. Jacques, lovely to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. Let's start off with this. I'm going to focus, first of all, on the state security allegations. You, of course, broke this 1 billion rand slush fund story a couple of years ago. Remind us of what the allegations were around that and of the development of this principal agent network.
Around 2007-2008, the Director General of State Security, Mr. Manzini, and his deputy, who was Arthur Fraser, approached the Minister of Intelligence, who was then Ronnie Kasrils, and they said to the Minister that they wanted to expand the agent network in the organization, and the Minister approved the network in principle. Kasrils left when Thabo Mbeki left, and then the Minister of State Security became Siyabonga Kwele. Anyway, to shorten it, over a period of 3 years, State Security spent around R1 billion of taxpayers' money on a network that investigators found out afterwards were actually useless, that there was nothing of substance in this project. The project employed 72 agents. These 72 agents nearly had 300 cars to their disposal that was kept in 3 different warehouses. Houses were bought. Family members were appointed. Money flowed from the central account or from the central fund to the private accounts of some of the managers. Why this wastage and corruption became so important is that the man in charge of the PAN project was Arthur Fraser, who was then, as I said, was the Deputy Director General. There was an investigation afterwards by state security advocates and an investigations team that brought out a report in which they, amongst others, recommended that Fraser should be charged with treason, because he installed a separate computer server in his house. And all the intelligence reports were sent directly to the server. It wasn't sent to the state security mainframe, it was sent to Arthur's computer at his house. And he would then decide what to send to the mainframe. And the investigators in the end said that he probably tried to establish a parallel intelligence network, and therefore made himself guilty of fraud. There's also allegations, and there's also evidence, and it's in the reports, that the agents, for example, forged Ronnie Kasrils' signature.
In fact, we actually had him on the program talking about that yesterday. And further to that, I went on to ask him, is Arthur Fraser an honest man? He told us he was pretty disturbed by the fact that his signature had been forged on a document alluding to the network. Let's quickly listen in to what he had to say yesterday. We'll have it in a moment.
I am seeking legal advice as well, because my signature was used for criminal purposes if it was used in that way. So I, like Arthur Fraser's family and SARS, who are threatening the author of the book, of Jacques Pauw, of his book, I'm going to my legal people as well. And I'm looking into this. What I would say, and I'm not finding Arthur Fraser guilty or SARS guilty, but at their level, when you've got to deal with something that is so acutely affecting the fiscus of our country and the misuse of funds, the first thing that one would like to see from Arthur Fraser, who's the senior person in intelligence and security now, and SARS, the first thing is, this is so serious, we want to open this up for the public to see and understand, not simply to deal with in this way of hitting back at the author.
So that was what he had to say about that, Jacques, but I noticed that there are allegations about Arthur Fraser's family members as well in the book, which they vehemently deny. They say you're basically lying about these allegations.
Arthur Fraser comes up 97 times in the book. They sent out a statement yesterday and they said, first of all, I got all my information from a guy called Mr. Paul Engelke, who was a state security advocate who now lives in Russia. Which is true, I did go and speak to Engelke in Russia. He wasn't the man who gave me the reports and the information. In that statement to start with, they call Engelke now a Russian double spy, which is bizarre. He was a state security advocate. Anyway, they say there's three things wrong. The one is that I call somebody his brother-in-law, and it isn't in fact not his brother-in-law, that I link his brother, who was by the way involved in the cars and run the warehouses in which the cars were stored, and so was Arthur Fraser's son. And he said, I also link his brother to a company. And then thirdly, and that's the funny one, is he said, I called his mother, I think it's Mrs. C.F. Fraser, who is 83, and he puts her age in brackets, I call her a spy. Now, I have the evidence that Mrs. Fraser, and we're talking about 7 years ago, so she wasn't 83 then, about 7 years ago, she was on the board, she was a board member of an NGO that dealt with violence in schools. And 10 million rand of the PAN money found itself to this NGO. And this NGO, of course, was not involved in state security at all. This is documented, and I will be very happy to show that.
Jacques, I've got one last question as we look at these issues of state security. The president is now possibly facing 783 counts, fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering. Who do you believe were the key figures at that time that allowed him to ascend to the presidency?
It's not me saying it, it's other publications saying it, is that Arthur Fraser, for example, played a key role in that he was apparently the man that gave the spy tapes to Michael Hulley, Zuma's attorney, and Zuma himself. Because at the time there was the so-called Browse-Moll report, it's quite a complicated story, which was investigated by Arthur Fraser in his capacity as Deputy Director General of State Security, found the tapes, and it found its way to Michael Hulley. So certainly in the law enforcement agencies, Arthur Fraser played a key role.
All right, thanks very much for that, Jacques. Stay with us. We'll continue this conversation right after the break.